On January 3rd, 2026, at exactly 2:01 a.m., American helicopters touched down in Caracas. 30 minutes later, Nicolas Maduro was in custody. And $17, $3 trillion of oil reserves changed hands. But this wasn't just about Venezuela. This was the next inevitable step in a pattern that has destroyed empires for over 2,000 years. A pattern so predictable, so mathematically certain, that once you understand it, you'll see it everywhere. Right now, the United States national debt stands at $38.5 trillion, growing $6.12 billion per day, every single day. Interest payments just crossed $1 trillion annually for the first time in history. And 142,000 millionaires are fleeing traditional wealth centers this year alone, the largest voluntary wealth migration ever recorded. This isn't coincidence. This is stage 4 of a 7-stage cycle that has toppled the Dutch guilder, the British pound, and the Roman denarius before it. The Venezuela raid isn't the beginning. It's a symptom of an empire in the expansion phase, desperately grabbing resources to maintain the illusion of stability. What comes next is already written in history. The only question is whether you'll be on the right side of the greatest wealth transfer ever recorded. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly which stage we're in and exactly what happens next. Let me show you something that, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Throughout the last 2,000 years, empires rise and fall following the exact same pattern, same sequence. Same stages, same outcome. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Rome in 265 AD, the Dutch in 1780, Britain in 1931, or America in 2026. The pattern is identical, and it's unfolding right now. Here's how it works. Stage 1, sound money foundation. Every empire begins the same way. Sound money, real value. The currency is backed by something tangible, gold, silver, hard assets. This attracts commerce. Trade flows through the empire. Wealth accumulates, productive capacity expands, education flourishes, innovation thrives. The society becomes rich through genuine productivity, not financial engineering. This is the golden age. This is when empires are built on real foundations. Stage 2, expansion and social programs. Once wealthy, the empire begins to expand. Not just military expansion, social expansion, infrastructure projects, public works, social programs. These programs are initially funded by the wealth created in stage 1. Roads, aqueducts, healthcare, education. The society feels prosperous. The middle class grows. Quality of life improves across all sectors. But there's a subtle shift happening. The empire starts spending more on maintaining prosperity than creating it. Consumption begins to outpace production, slowly, almost imperceptibly. Stage 3, military overextension and debasement. To maintain its global position, the empire must project power. Military might becomes expensive, protecting trade routes, maintaining overseas bases, defending allies. Engaging in conflicts that drain resources, the costs rise faster than revenue. Taxes increase, but they're never enough, so the empire makes a fateful choice. Instead of cutting spending or defaulting on obligations, it debases the currency. In ancient Rome, they shaved silver from coins. In modern times, they print money. The effect is identical. More currency chasing the same amount of goods. Inflation begins to creep upward. Initially, this seems to work. The empire can pay its bills. The system continues functioning. But trust is eroding. Foreign holders of the currency begin to notice. They start diversifying, quietly at first. Stage 4, desperate resource acquisition. This is where things accelerate. The empire realizes its currency is losing credibility. So it does what all empires do at this stage. It goes after hard assets, natural resources, strategic materials, anything with intrinsic value. Military operations become resource extraction missions. Regime change becomes about controlling oil, minerals, strategic infrastructure. The empire tells itself this is about security, about democracy, about fighting terrorism or drugs. But underneath, it's about one thing: acquiring real assets to back up an increasingly hollow financial system. This is exactly where we are right now. Venezuela holds 303 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. At $57 per barrel, that's $17.3 trillion. On January 3rd, 2026, the United States took control of those reserves through a military operation that captured the country's president. Not a coincidence, not an outlier. This is stage 4 behavior, textbook empire economics. Now, here's what makes this pattern so devastating. Stage 4 doesn't stabilize the empire. It's a temporary patch on a systemic problem, because the fundamental issue, spending exceeding productive capacity, hasn't been addressed. All stage 4 does is buy time, usually 5 to 15 years, sometimes less. And while the empire is focused on external resource grabs, internal problems accelerate. Stage 5, loss of confidence. This is when the general population begins to sense something is wrong. Inflation becomes noticeable. Not economic reports, actual prices at the grocery store. The middle class realizes their savings are losing purchasing power. Wages don't keep up with costs. Wealth gaps widen dramatically. Those with access to hard assets prosper. Those holding cash deteriorate. Social cohesion fractures. Political extremism rises. Blame gets assigned. Class warfare intensifies. Foreign governments start actively diversifying away from the empire's currency. They don't announce it loudly, they do it systematically. Trade settlements shift to alternative currencies. Gold reserves increase. Bilateral agreements bypass the dominant currency. The reserve currency status, which provided enormous privilege in earlier stages, begins to crack. Stage 6. Fiscal dominance. Here's where it gets catastrophic. The debt has grown so large that interest payments consume a massive portion of government revenue. The central bank faces an impossible choice. Raise interest rates to fight inflation? That makes the debt unpayable. Keep rates low to service the debt? That destroys the currency's purchasing power. This is called fiscal dominance. The government's debt is so large, it dominates monetary policy. Former Fed Chair Janet Yellen just warned about this on January 5th, 2026. She said, "The preconditions for fiscal dominance are clearly strengthening." Translation, we're entering stage 6. Stage 7. Collapse and reset. The final stage is hyperinflation or default. Currency becomes worthless. The system resets. Wealth that was stored in the dying currency evaporates. Generational savings destroyed in months. Wealth that was stored in hard assets, gold, silver, productive land, strategic resources, explodes in value relative to the collapsing currency. This is the great wealth transfer, from those who trusted the system to those who understood the pattern, every single time. Now let me prove this to you with 3 undeniable historical examples. The Roman Empire, Rome, the eternal city, the empire that dominated the Mediterranean for nearly 500 years. At its peak, Rome controlled 50,000 miles of roads, built aqueducts that still function today, created a legal system we still reference. Trade generated vast wealth. The denarius, Rome's silver coin, was the global reserve currency of its time. But look at what happened. In 64 AD, under Emperor Nero, the denarius contained 94% silver. Real money, real value. But Rome was expensive. Military campaigns, barbarian threats, an empire spanning 3 continents. So they started the debasement, gradually reducing the silver content. By 100 AD, it was 85% silver. By 200 AD, 50% silver. Then the acceleration. By 265 AD, the denarius contained only 0.5% silver. And here's what happened to prices. They exploded 1,000% across the entire empire. Soldiers demanded higher wages as the coins became worthless. Emperor Caracalla raised military pay 50% around 210 AD just to maintain loyalty. Administrative costs soared. Logistical nightmares. And Rome had no precious metals left to plunder from enemies, so they did what all empires do. They levied more taxes on the people. Hyperinflation, soaring taxes, worthless money. This trifecta dissolved Rome's trade. Economic activity collapsed. The wealth transfer was complete. Those holding land and gold survived. Those holding denarius were destroyed. By 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire ceased to exist. The Dutch Empire. Fast forward to the 17th century. The Dutch Golden Age. The Dutch guilder became the world's first modern reserve currency. Global commerce flowed through Amsterdam. The Dutch East India Company was the most valuable company in human history, worth $7.9 trillion in today's dollars. Spice trade, shipping dominance, financial innovation. The Dutch created the modern stock market, but maintaining this empire was costly. Colonial possessions, naval fleets, trade route protection. By the 1700s, the Dutch were overextended. They became heavily indebted. Internal fighting erupted between provinces, between rich and poor, between political factions. Their military weakened, classic signs of late-stage empire. Then came the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War in 1780. The British, a rising power, challenged the Dutch directly. They attacked Dutch shipping, strangled their trade routes. Other competitors like France pounced on the opportunity. The war lasted until 1784. The British won decisively, both financially and militarily. That war bankrupted the Dutch. Yep, their debt became unpayable. Their equity markets collapsed. And the guilder, once the global reserve currency, lost its status. Wealth transferred from Dutch holders to British holders. From the declining empire to the rising one, the pattern repeated perfectly. Check. Verified. Undeniable. The British Empire, Britain, the empire on which the sun never set. At its peak, it controlled 25% of the world's landmass. The British pound sterling was the world's dominant reserve currency for over 200 years. London was the financial capital of the world. British ships controlled global trade routes. But by 1900, the costs of maintaining the empire were exceeding the benefits. The Gilded Age created massive wealth gaps. Britain started borrowing excessively. Other nations, Germany, Japan, the United States, grew stronger economically and militarily. Then came World War I, financially devastating. Britain borrowed heavily from the United States to fund the war effort. By 1918, Britain was a debtor nation for the first time in centuries. They tried to maintain the pound's value. They struggled. They manipulated. But by 1931, Britain was forced to abandon the gold standard. The pound was devalued. Still, they held on. World War II drained even more resources. By 1944, at the Bretton Woods Conference, the writing was on the wall. The US dollar, backed by two-thirds of the world's gold reserves, became the new global reserve currency. But Britain didn't let go easily. They used colonial influence to slow the transition. Sterling balances were held by Commonwealth countries, India, Australia, Ireland, for political reasons, not economic ones. By 1967, another major devaluation. The pound lost 14% of its value overnight. And here's the key. It took over 20 years for the pound to be completely dethroned. The transition was slow, painful, and devastating for British citizens. Those who held pound-denominated assets watched their wealth evaporate. Those who had diversified into dollars and hard assets preserved their purchasing power. The wealth transfer was complete. 3 empires, different centuries, different technologies, different enemies, same pattern, same stages, same outcome. Now let's apply this pattern to today, to the United States, to the Venezuela raid, to what's happening right now. Let's walk through this systematically, stage by stage, no emotion, just facts. The United States established this in 1944 at Bretton Woods. The dollar was linked to gold at $35 per ounce. All other currencies were pegged to the dollar. America held 2/3 of the world's gold reserves. This was sound money, real value, the foundation of American economic dominance. Check. The foundation was legitimate. Post-World War II, America built an unprecedented welfare state, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interstate highway system, public education expansion. These programs were initially funded by genuine economic growth, manufacturing dominance, technological innovation, trade surpluses. The American middle class exploded. Quality of life improved dramatically across all income levels. This was real prosperity, funded by real productivity. Check. The expansion phase happened exactly as the pattern predicts. This is where it started to crack. The Vietnam War, the Cold War arms race, military bases in over 80 countries worldwide. By the late 1960s, other nations began exchanging their dollars for gold. They noticed the overextension. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon closed the gold window. No more gold backing. The dollar became pure fiat currency, backed by nothing but faith in the US government. This was the debasement moment, the Roman coin shaving, the modern version. And what happened next? Inflation. The 1970s saw double-digit inflation. The purchasing power of the dollar was cut in half within a decade. But the dollar survived because of one critical development, the petrodollar system. In 1974, the U.S. made a deal with Saudi Arabia. Oil would be priced in dollars globally. In exchange, the U.S. would provide military protection. This created artificial demand for dollars. Countries needed dollars to buy oil, so they held dollar reserves. This extended stage 3 by 50 years. But it didn't eliminate the pattern. It delayed it. Check. Currency debasement occurred exactly on schedule. The petrodollar was a temporary patch. Now we're here. This is where Venezuela fits. Let's look at recent history. Iraq, 2003, oil reserves. Libya, 2011, oil and gold reserves. Syria, strategic positioning. And now Venezuela, 303 billion barrels of oil, worth the $17, $3 trillion at current prices. On January 3, 2026, the United States conducted Operation Absolute Resolve. They captured President Maduro. They took control of Venezuela's government. President Trump stated explicitly, "We're going to have our very large United States oil companies go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, and start making money for the country." Translation, we're taking the oil. But here's what's critical to understand. This isn't sustainable. It's a temporary measure. Venezuela's oil infrastructure is gutted. It would take $180 billion in 15 years to return to peak production levels. Even if successful, Venezuela was producing less than 1% of global oil supply. This doesn't fundamentally change America's fiscal trajectory. It's a patch, a band-aid. Stage 4 behavior. Check. The United States is actively pursuing hard asset acquisition through military means. Pattern confirmed. This is the stage we're entering right now. Look at the data. In 2025, 142,000 millionaires relocated internationally, the highest number ever recorded. Projections for 2026, 165,000 millionaires relocating. The largest voluntary transfer of private capital in modern history. The UK is losing 1,685 millionaires this year, $66 billion in liquid investable wealth. China is losing millionaires. India is losing millionaires. Where are they going? The UAE, Singapore, countries with zero income tax, political stability, and asset-friendly policies. This is capital flight. Wealthy individuals sensing instability and moving their assets to safer jurisdictions. Meanwhile, the dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has declined from 71% in 2000 to 59% in 2023. Countries are diversifying. China and Russia are settling trade in yuan and rubles. BRICS nations are discussing alternative settlement systems. This isn't collapse yet. This is early stage 5. The confidence is cracking, not shattered. Check. Loss of confidence is measurable, accelerating and following the historical pattern perfectly. Here's where it gets terrifying. U.S. national debt, $38. $5 trillion growing $6. $12 billion per day. That's $255 million per hour. $4, $25 million per minute. $70,842 per second. Interest payments in 2026 will exceed $1 trillion for the first time in history. That's triple what it was in 2020. By 2035, interest payments will reach $1, $8 trillion annually. The Congressional Budget Office projects debt will reach 156% of GDP by 2055 under current law. Under alternative scenarios, if current tax cuts are made permanent, debt could reach 220% of GDP. And here's the kicker. Former Fed Chair Janet Yellen just warned on January 5th, 2026, that the preconditions for fiscal dominance are clearly strengthening. She said if investors lose faith that the U.S. will return to running surpluses, they'll demand higher interest rates. And higher rates on 38, $5 trillion of debt, catastrophic. The Federal Reserve is trapped. Raise rates to fight inflation. Debt becomes unpayable. Keep rates low. Currency loses purchasing power. This is fiscal dominance. The debt is so large it controls monetary policy. Check. The United States is entering stage 6. The math is undeniable. We're not here yet. But the pattern says this is coming. History gives us a time frame. Once fiscal dominance sets in, the collapse phase typically takes 5 to 25 years. Some economists, like Kent Smetters from Penn Wharton Budget Model, project the breaking point around 2050. Others think it could happen sooner if confidence breaks suddenly. A loss of reserve currency status, a failed bond auction, a sovereign debt crisis. The final stage always involves either hyperinflation or default. There is no third option. And when it happens, the wealth transfer is complete. Those holding currency get wiped out. Those holding hard assets survive. We're not there yet. But every indicator is pointing in that direction. The pattern is playing out, stage by stage, exactly as history predicts. Let me be absolutely clear about something. I'm not predicting the future. I'm showing you a pattern that has repeated itself for 2,000 years across every major empire in recorded history. Rome, the Dutch, the British, all followed the same 7 stages, all ended the same way. And the United States is currently in stage 4, entering stage 5, with stage 6 beginning to manifest. This isn't opinion. This is measurable data following a historical pattern. Now, here's what people always say when confronted with this pattern, but this time is different. They say technology will save us, AI productivity, innovation, American exceptionalism. Let me address this directly. Reality. The Roman Empire had revolutionary technology for its time, concrete, aqueducts, advanced engineering. The British Empire had the Industrial Revolution, the greatest technological leap in human history. Technology didn't save either empire because the problem isn't productivity. It's the relationship between spending and revenue. When spending persistently exceeds revenue by massive margins, 6 to 7% of GDP annually, no amount of productivity growth solves that. The US would need sustained 5 to 6% GDP growth for decades. That hasn't happened and won't happen. Reality. The British pound was the reserve currency for 200 years. It failed. Reserve currency status doesn't prevent decline. It delays it and makes the eventual fall more devastating because when reserve currencies collapse, they take the entire global financial system with them temporarily. Reality. Yes, technically correct. The US can print unlimited dollars. But printing money to pay debts is hyperinflation. That's not saving the system. That's destroying it differently. Ask Weimar Germany. Ask Zimbabwe. Ask Venezuela. Printing money doesn't create wealth. It transfers wealth from holders of the currency to those who print it first. This time isn't different. The pattern is absolute. If the pattern holds, and it always has, we're heading toward a wealth transfer of historic proportions. Not tomorrow, not next month, but within the next 10 to 25 years. Those who understand this will position accordingly. Those who don't will watch their savings evaporate. Here's what history tells us about survival strategies. Every empire collapse in history rewarded those holding tangible assets: gold, silver, productive land, strategic resources. When Rome collapsed, those holding land survived. When the Dutch guilder failed, those holding gold preserved wealth. When the British pound was devalued, those who had diversified into dollars and hard assets maintained purchasing power. The pattern is clear. Hard assets retain value through monetary transitions. Specialized skills retain value regardless of currency. If you can provide essential services, healthcare, engineering, agriculture, skilled trades, you maintain earning capacity. During Argentina's multiple currency crises, those with in-demand skills adapted. Those dependent on fixed income or savings were destroyed. 142,000 millionaires are relocating this year. They understand something most people don't. When an empire enters late-stage decline, capital controls often follow. Wealth taxation, exit taxes, asset confiscation. Having optionality, second residences, foreign accounts, international business structures, provides protection. This isn't about being unpatriotic. This is about recognizing historical patterns and acting rationally. The dollar will likely remain dominant for years, possibly decades. But its purchasing power will erode. Holding multiple currencies, especially those of creditor nations or commodity-backed systems, provides hedge protection. China's yuan, Swiss franc, gold-backed instruments. These won't prevent loss, but they reduce concentration risk. Here's the most common mistake people make when presented with this information. They do nothing. They hear the analysis, understand the pattern, see the data, and then continue as if nothing has changed. This is normalcy bias. It won't happen in my lifetime. Someone will fix it. The government won't let it get that bad. History proves otherwise, every time. The Roman citizens didn't believe their empire would fall either. The British didn't think the pound would lose reserve status. It happened anyway, because the mathematical forces behind empire collapse don't care about beliefs. The January 3rd operation in Venezuela isn't the cause of the wealth transfer. It's a symptom of where we are in the cycle. When empires enter stage 4, they start grabbing hard assets: oil, gold, strategic resources. This is desperation disguised as strength. It's a temporary measure that buys time but doesn't solve underlying problems. The fact that the United States felt compelled to conduct a military operation to seize oil reserves worth $17. $3 trillion tells you everything about the fiscal situation. If the system were stable, this wouldn't be necessary. If the dollar were truly secure, resource acquisition through force wouldn't be happening. This is late-stage empire behavior. This is the pattern asserting itself. Based on historical precedent, here's the likely sequence. In the next 2 to 5 years, increasing wealth migration, rising inflation, currency volatility, growing social tensions. In the next 5 to 10 years, potential loss of reserve currency status or significant erosion of dollar dominance, increased capital controls, possible sovereign debt crisis. In the next 10-25 years, major monetary reset, either hyperinflation or default, complete restructuring of the global financial system. This isn't a forecast, it's a historical pattern. The time frame could be shorter if confidence breaks suddenly. It could be longer if the system is propped up longer than expected. But the direction is clear, the pattern is undeniable. So, what do you do with this information? First, educate yourself. Understand monetary history. Study empire cycles. Watch the indicators I've outlined. Second, diversify your wealth. Don't hold 100% of your assets in any single currency, country, or system. Third, acquire skills that retain value in economic transitions. Become indispensable. Fourth, build networks. Communities survive crises better than individuals. Fifth, position a portion of your wealth in hard assets. Not speculation, strategic allocation based on historical preservation patterns. And finally, stay informed. The pattern is playing out in real time. The Venezuela raid is one data point. Watch for the next moves: more resource acquisition, rising inflation, capital controls, social instability. These aren't random events. They're stages in a predictable cycle. We're living through one of the most significant wealth transfers in human history. Most people won't see it until it's too late. They'll trust the system, believe in American exceptionalism, and assume things will work out. History says they won't, not without severe pain first. You have a choice. Understand the pattern and position accordingly, or ignore it and hope this time is different. But remember, this time is never different. The pattern is absolute. The wealth transfer is coming. The only question is which side of it you'll be on. If this analysis opened your eyes, subscribe now. Hit the notification bell. Because this story is far from over. In my next video, I'll show you the specific indicators to watch that will tell you exactly when we're moving from stage 5 to stage 6. And I'll reveal the 3 assets that have outperformed everything else during every historical empire collapse. You need to see this information because the window to position yourself is closing. The pattern is absolute, the transfer is coming, and time is running out.